Okay, it is 6 o'clock, so I will call the meeting to order. Alicia, will you please do roll call?
Yep. Lori Belargin. Here. Ian McDonald.
Here.
Matt Kukal.
Here.
Lacey Oster.
Here.
Bruce Belargin.
Here.
Cherie Link. Marge Galil.
Here. Okay, our district mission. Together we engage, educate, and empower all learners, bridging their passions to pathways to create successful futures and positively contribute to our local and global communities. Is there a motion to approve our agenda tonight?
So
Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. For public comment, opinions and ideas contributed by students, parents, staff, and other citizens are valuable to the school board. All comments shall be directed to the board and not to staff or other meeting attendees. All statements should be directed to me, as no person may address or question board members individually. The board will receive such input without comment or take no action relative to any items brought forward. We may direct the district administrator to consider such an item at an appropriate place on the agenda or a subsequent meeting. Per board policy, public comment will be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Is there public comment tonight? There was, Brad, are you?
I turned the card in.
Perfect, awesome, you're
I
up.
didn't like filling out a red card, I didn't say that or no.
What was that?
I didn't like filling out that red card.
You
Change the color.
can take the hot seat then.
I know you get, meetings are long and lengthy sometimes, so I'll just try to make this as quick as I can. Some of this is just a couple concerns that kind of bother me. And I guess school boards are different today than they were back when I was working. Of course, society's different. But you know, I don't come to meetings, but I do watch them sometimes just a little bit later. You know, and I watched back in the October board meeting, October 24th, you talked about a new position. And during that position, you talked, a number of discussions went on, talked about how the position had just been increased salary-wise and stuff like that. But I'm talking about the HR position that you're looking at. And it's not about the position, it's just about kind of the handling of it. But I know that was talked about, one of the board members mentioned about it being a budgetary concern. And I know it's tabled, I understand that, but I watched the meeting, it bothered me, so I can't yell at my wife. She said I had to come out here and talk about it. You know, and another board member mentioned about getting comparables from other conferences and other schools. Someone else another member brought up how we just had increased the salary just about 4 years ago, pretty good, significant increase. And there was a question that was asked about having a job description. And I believe, if I remember right, I think it's McGrath is the kind of the guys that said this is something we should look at. What kind of bothered me is when a board member brought up and said, well, they brought up and talked here at the meeting about, well, we need to talk to other districts and get comparables. And it kind of just dropped, which is fine. I don't know what happens after it's over. But when they brought it up that they got some comparables, that person was kind of, they're trying to be proactive and diligent. And the way that person was treated. And I think if you looked at your first 7 steps about being on the board, about being president, about being attentive, about being respectful, I just felt that, you know, McGrath says we need this position. McGrath recommended salaries for teachers, comparable salaries to 12 other districts around here. McGrath recommended comparable salaries for the district administrators from 12 other districts around here. Did McGrath ask what the other 12 districts do? I don't have a problem with being status quo, but I don't know if we always have to be the trendsetter, especially at a time like now when costs, you're talking about a 6-figure position. Now, if you're increasing someone's salary, it's not a 6-figure. But if you're talking about an HR position, you're talking with benefits and everything well over $100,000. And the thing that concerned me was just kind of the process that went through where I know some of you work and you have jobs and you're busy and this is just something you're doing. You're doing it as a public, I've been a public servant for 32 years, you know, elected official for 32 years, and I know, and it's not rewarding financially, but it is self-fulfilling by some of the things, some of what you accomplished. But I just was kind of concerned about the way that kind of played out. I just thought, that, there's other ways, at least publicly, to address it. And another thing that I just thought was, you talked about policies, and I know there's a lot of policies, and I don't like policy, but.
Brad, you're just a little over time, so if you want to.
What's that?
You're just a little over time, so if you want to wrap it up, that would be.
Okay, well, real quick, I guess I said I'm not used to the new way,
No,
I'm
you're-
used to if you have something to say.
No, if
Um,
you finish your thought, but.
Yeah, you talked about policies in October, and then you're gonna talk about it, and I think Sheree mentioned, I think it was Sheree, one of the board members, asked about having a printed out copy, and then in November you approved them, and I hope that I didn't see from what I could tell, and I didn't see anybody looking at computers, but I know we went ahead and approved them without looking at them, and I just hope that we're just not blindly doing that. In the last 20 seconds, I wanna commend Ms. Donnelly and the board members. I know Lacey, you were there quite a bit, Matt, pushing, you did a heck of a job in a short period of time with the transition of the referendum to come out as, people think it was 100 votes, that's 50 votes. It lost by 50 votes, because if 50 people voted the other way, it would have passed. And I just think that they put a lot of effort, work, time, and energy, and it needs to be commended, and the other board members. I know I saw Matt and Lacey, most of all, out with their boards, so sorry I ran over.
Thank you, Brad. Okay, moving on to our next item on the agenda. It addresses students graduating early and then the changes to the registration guide. Are we connecting with?
I think I've heard him pop on. Let's see here. I heard it join.
Hey, Dr. Newman, you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Can you see me?
We can see you too, nice background.
Better than what you would have seen otherwise. Sorry I'm not there in person. Can you hear me okay? Is the connection all right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so the first one is our students graduating early. I submitted some paperwork to the district office last week for you to review if you'd like. But we have 5 students graduating early: Hope Darrow, Grace Gardner, Caitlin Peterson, Caleb Whitlock, and Jesse Wright. Hope, she's hoping to continue working and saving up to attend Northwood and hopefully attain a human services degree. Grace and Caitlin are both planning to go to cosmetology school. Grace's timeline kind of undefined right now. Caitlin's hoping to enroll in February. And Caleb, he is going on mission for the Church of Latter-day Saints. I believe that's still to be determined. And Jesse is going to go right into the workforce and look for jobs there. So those are our 5, and we congratulate them for their efforts and their work during their 12 years with us, 11 and a half, or 12 and a half, depending on how long they're with us, and we appreciate their efforts there and congratulate them and their families and the staff that got them along the way there. Any questions on our graduating early students? And then the other part submitted were some updates and changes in regard to our upcoming as we prepare for course registration for our students for the 23-24 school year. As I continue to learn about the systems and the courses and the programs that we offer, really the biggest change to the guide is trying to outline and add some structure, if you will, really to our physical education courses that might not have been there, and allowing for some different access and some different opportunities for students in a more outlined way as we do for other programs and courses that we have in our building. And so that would be the biggest change. And one thing not on there yet, and we're still working on, is our math class that we currently have through Northwoods, as we look at offering that again for next year. So that was probably the only other one that we missed. But other than that, my understanding, pretty typical changes looping courses that we have, or some minor tweaks to others, but really the biggest changes were some structure to our physical education courses.
Great.
That's all I got.
Does anybody have specific questions? Lori?
So Andrew, are you saying that there's going to be a change to this in the area of math? You said something about a class that it wasn't clear. Do you mean there's a class that's going to be added still to this registration guide?
Possibly, and I'm not sure about the timeline on the process of when we acquired it this year, but we do have a math class through Northwood Tech that we are offering, and there's been some student dropping from it, so we have some pretty low numbers, but looking at trying to figure out if this is a class we should continue. So I recognize that I must have missed it on the copy and paste, so it might have been just missed on the document, unless it was already there, which it wasn't a change, but I believe it was a miss, and looking into seeing if we can or should pull that course off for next year.
So will we be approving this at our next meeting then?
Will you have that information before our next meeting?
Yep, I can verify that. Oh, well, yeah,
the
I
math?
can. I mean, and that was a part of my wonder was, can we approve the changes that we have now, and then if that's something we tend to add on later, do we just add that on, or is it all that needs to be done right now?
So it would be approved as is, and if something changes, we would update it in the future?
Right, that's my wonder.
What class is it?
I believe it's I could be wrong, I want to say it's an Algebra 1 class, maybe it's wrong, through Northwood Tech.
So I can speak to that briefly.
Okay.
if it's
Yeah,
helpful.
sorry,
So,
yeah, thanks Shannon.
So it's a class that we brought on that juniors could take instead of Algebra 2, and it's designed for students that are going into the trades. Just to provide another opportunity, they can get college credit for it. A couple other districts around us contracted Northwoods as well. So we tried adding it, we've tried like 3 times to add it. 1 year they couldn't find an instructor, then COVID hit. So we finally were able to add it this past school year, but late. I mean, it was like early summer. I haven't kept up with registration numbers and those kinds of things, so they know that at the building level, but that was the intent of why we brought it on, was to give students another option outside of just Algebra 2, and students specifically that were looking for a path in the trades.
So is that this math credit Algebra 2 in the building academy? Or is that
No,
different?
so, students in our building academy have been encouraged to take a look at that class. I didn't look close enough to see, it may not even be on this particular document because of how late we ended up adding it. So that's possible. So my recommendation would be to, by next meeting, approve what you see here. And we can certainly bring back to you if there's an amendment to this document when we finalize that. My experience has been as well that, sometimes it takes a little bit to finalize instructors and those kinds of things, so I mean, certainly, if you'd like to wait, you can wait, but that would be my recommendation.
And is it because it's a little bit dependent on Northwood's Tech?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Then we have to have so many kids that are registered, and if there's some criteria that has to be met before we could officially say, like, yes, we're bringing it back. So, again, I haven't talked to them about that. Maybe they don't even want to bring it back, but I think there's...
Is there a timeline on your end, Andrew, or?
I mean, as I'm thinking out loud, I could just add the course on there, right? Because just because we offer courses doesn't mean that they're ran, again, because of student interest or staffing, right? So I think I'll just go on and add it. That way it's on there and you can have it approved so we can move forward. And again, right, dependent on interest, dependent on their staffing, dependent on other things that we we have that'll determine if we run it. I'll just add that option on there, so then we're safe and it can be approved. And so it's on there, we don't have to wait, if that is okay.
Yeah, let's just put it on there.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
I.
All right, I'll add, so it's technically called applied math.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I agree with that.
So that's a course that we'll be offering right through our school, so would it be one of those, start college now, early college credit, courses? How does that all work?
I'm not certain on it, I know that, so we provide the space and we have the person come here and for that, so I would have to figure out what that would technically be categorized as, unless Shannon would know.
Yep, so it is. So basically, instead of, right, they offer that class at Northwoods, instead of our kids trekking there, we were able to figure out a partnership, or their instructor comes here, the kids take it here. So, but they still get college credit just like they would if they were going to Northwood.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Add to it. Thanks for clarifying.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions for Andrew while he's up? Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you, I'll make the change and then submit it back to everybody.
Great.
All right, take care,
Bye.
everyone.
Great.
Yep. You can, yep.
Perfect. Okay, moving on our agenda, talking about referendum discussion. We have some people here for discussion as well, so Shannon, do you want to take this?
Yeah, so I thought it might be helpful for you as a board to have kind of another panel of experts join us tonight to be able to answer questions that you have, as you guys have, ongoing dialogue, and we kind of know if potentially going back to referendum in April is something that ultimately the board decides to do. We have a relatively short time frame. So we've got Wold, we've got Margaret Johnson, we've got School Perceptions joining us virtually. I left it kind of open for all of them, so they don't have presentations or anything prepared tonight. It really just is to kind of help us work through the conversation of, right, looking at projects, looking at, do dollar amounts still make sense for what we were looking at for the projects on the referendum? School perceptions, I know I shared an overview of my conversation with them. I thought it might be helpful for you to hear directly from them. Some insight and advice that they may have based off of our data from our survey. So I think it's really kind of up to you in terms of, as a board, what do you think might be helpful? If there's specific questions you have for any of these groups of people, as you kind of think about your discussion and decision making. So.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for taking the time to join us, because I know our last meeting that there was a lot of emotions, a lot of things between the referendum not passing and kind of what are our next steps as far as where to go. So does anybody have a question or I guess discussion?
I will. Maybe I'll start with Rob, School Perceptions. It's Rob, right?
Correct, yeah, Rob, I'm speaking now, and then Darren from our team as well is here.
Perfect. You presented the results of that survey. Could you just give us just for me at least, a really high-level overview? What was the dollar amount and what were the projects that based on the information you had, would have passed? Could you refresh that?
Yes, I was hoping you'd ask, because I just opened it up. So, this is what we were seeing, this was kind of the summary slide of where you landed. So just as a reminder for everybody in the room, you have 6 projects that you tested. The major building systems at the elementary school, the stadium improvements, the PAC, the gym, parking expansion, and softball and baseball fields relocation. So what you're looking at here was a list of projects in the order that they were prioritized, and then parenthetically, we have how much each project cost. So your data kind of shook out in the way that it often does. The major building systems, these are things that people have to do to their house. They're very familiar, and they get it, and they know why you have to do it. So, whether it's rooftop units or HVAC units, or it's your sidewalk, or it's your windows or roof, whatever the case may be. People get that. They have to do those things to the house. They understand what you would need to do to the school. It always tests the highest, and it tested well for you too at 2.38. That's really quite a high score. And then you had two other ones that were above 2. And the reason I call that number is, as a reminder, as a survey taker, I can rate each of these as a low, medium, or high priority. Low was 1, high was 3. So my first, my first thing that I do when I eyeball this is I say, okay, which projects were above 2, which were below 2. And I start with the ones that are above 2, because at least people are leaning towards higher priority than lower priority. And number 3, the building systems, the stadium improvements, and the PAC. Then we said, well, how much is the community willing to support? So then what we did for you is we said, well, let's weight the support based on how big the groups are in the community. Or in other words, what this was saying is, if you took a $22 million question to ballot, how many people would we expect to vote for it? And you were hovering around 52.3%, which was actually in the margin of error. So that was a little bit above 50%, but it was still in the too close to call range because of what the margin of error was. The support for a smaller referendum then went quite high. Now, obviously, the trade-off there is support is what? 1 million, 10 million, 21.9 million. But the smaller you got, the more support you got, and it went up quite heavily. You got outside the margin of error, and you were looking at about 64% for a referendum that was small. So then we said, what did we learn? We said, well, there's support to pursue something. A referendum at 22 million total, too close to call, but support increases as tax impacts, costs, and scopes decrease. The 3 projects that exceeded the medium priority were the updates at the elementary schools, the stadium improvements, and the PAC. So I guess what I'm kind of looking at, and by the way, this is not Darren and I speaking necessarily here, this is what the data is telling us, is the number one thing people are going to say if you choose to take something back to ballot is, what are you doing differently? You know, we told you no once, we collectively, meaning the majority, despite it being close, we collectively, the majority said no, so what are you doing different this time if I'm going to change my vote from no to yes? The easiest thing to do is to make it cheaper. So if you were to do that, then the 3 projects that I'm seeing that you'd like to think about to take the ballot are the system updates, stadium improvements, and the PAC. The other thing I would say, though, is bear in mind the cost of these. So let's go back here. You know, it's easy. I recognize that it's easy for me to say and much harder to do, but you have to get this in under 22 million. So I think on the one hand, if you were to do 2 questions again, it seems like your survey respondents were quite supportive of your major building systems. And that seems like it would lend itself very well to a first question. It also looks good for you politically, because what really backfires and what really gives a bad taste in people's mouths is if you come back to them later on and say, you know, we're really happy about athletics project X or arts project X, but we need to fix our roof. Because what people inevitably say is, why did you buy a car without a steering wheel? You know, why would you do something that's fun, that's a little bit more interesting when your house isn't in order? So to me, that seems, and to your survey respondents, it seems like that's got to be kind of what you package in option 1. And frankly, that is the most important. You know, it's really hard to justify having a PAC if your roof leaks, or whatever the case may be. You could think about doing a second question, but I think you got to get the PAC below what it is right now. Because if you got no higher than $22 million in terms of what your community is willing to support, well, you say 22 minus 6, you're looking at 16 million. So this has got to get below 10 million. And then you could, in theory, package your stadium improvements and your PAC together, because both of those projects are going to get your flag wavers up. You're going to get your people that are very passionate about your athletics. You're going to get people that are very passionate about the arts. By putting those 2 together, I would say it makes a logical second question. But at this point, I would say the gym, parking, baseball, softball fields is off the table, and you can justify that based on all those projects being below 2. Final thing I'll say, because I recognize that was a short question and I threw about 1,000 words into there, but I do know that Darren has some experience here in terms of the 2-question strategy and what he did to get the cost down a little bit. So Darren, let me toss the ball in your court.
Yeah, right. So back in 2016, and this was one of my first real deep relationships with school perceptions, we did a survey as well in Slinger, which is a district, about 3,500 kids, 5-building system in the bedroom community of Milwaukee. we had really resounding support for 30 million. And then the 11.5 million that it took to build a performing arts center at that time had really 50-50-ish, like 54-46 kind of support. So what we did is we challenged our architect. We went back and said, well, certainly the 30 million of major building system updates, secure entrances at all 5 buildings, LED lighting at all 5 buildings, all that, we knew we had 70-30 support on that. Not so unlike the clear support you have for the building system and the stadium. We challenged the architect to redesign the Performing Arts Center a bit, not compromise its function, but maybe take some of the bells and whistles off. At that time, it had a balcony, it had some things on it that maybe would have been nice, but not essential. And they made it stadium style, took the balcony off, and that took it from 11.5 down to 9.8 million. And then we were comfortable making it a second question on the ballot. We still weren't so sure that the Performing Arts Center could be lumped in with the other 30 million, so we split it out on the ballot, just to be sure. And as it turned out, both questions passed. There's something psychological about getting below that $10 million threshold, we found, because the results soared. But we still separated the question out. And so as we've been talking with your district, and we've really enjoyed our chats with your new superintendent. She's a joy to work with, and Rob and I had a nice strategy session with her, and we couldn't help but think that maybe just to split out 2 questions so you can get some really nice core work done, but also really showing your community that you're listening to that threshold, that $22 million threshold, because as Rob said, you probably want to come back saying, what's different? And so maybe reshuffling the deck a little bit and repackaging it would be a good way to go about it. They clearly hear that you listen to them and you try a somewhat different approach.
Thank you. Did you guys come up with options for that, to get that to 22 million by chance? Did you come up with a?
We did come up with a list of items, but it's really cut the scope. It's not
Right.
that you deliver something for less money, it's all based on what the scope is, and so. Darren, what year did you say that referendum was that you ran?
That was 2016-17 school year when we put that together. We had it all completed by 18-19.
So if you ran a 9.8 million at 5% inflation annually since that point, that's 13.7 million. So it's the same price.
I don't think you're getting, personally, just from my end, I don't think that auditorium's moving, and I don't think the middle school's moving. I think it's that stadium that we'd have to cut 3 million off, which means you just get the 9-lane track with a grass field and you put a scoreboard. I don't know what that costs. Or what
you
you
could
guys
start looking at the different components, like if you were looking at the auditorium, you could say, well, do we need to build a scene shop with that, for example? And you could reduce that square feet, say, that's something maybe we could build, sets on stage, or we build it someplace else. It limits what you can do though, because then the set's on stage all the time versus in the scene shop. So you start talking about what some of those compromises are. The stadium would be, like you throw out there, do you just do the track, or do you do the turf and the track and nothing else? You start looking at the pieces and components. I'm not sure that with how high the maintenance poles, and knowing that's always what you will get the most support for, if people say just take care of what you have, I don't think you're reducing items there. So it's really looking at the other items and saying, what do you take out of it? Before you start reducing the auditorium too, I really try and figure out, well, what are people gonna compare it to? Because if they're gonna say, well, we looked at this one and this one and this one, and you're significantly different than that, then you're setting a different expectation. So understanding what the expectations are around it would be another component. But we're basing those numbers on other auditoriums that we've done and that are in your area that we visited. So I'm not sure if there's nothing super magical about that auditorium. It doesn't have like it's not 1,000 seats, it doesn't have the balcony, it doesn't have all those other items. You'll start compromising the functionality. Like if you take the fly loft out, now it's not exactly like what other people have. But we did look at, are there ways to get down to that 22 million, but they're pretty significant counts.
Those 3 together, what was the total again?
25.
25.
That was the first question.
Yeah. So it's gotta come off the field. So is there ways to cut that in half, the field? If you leave can you leave the grass?
I would suggest cutting the field in half.
Can you do, But I thought we talked about, can the track get done, or do the bleachers have to move in order to make way for that?
You could do the track in place. One of the only reasons that we looked at doing both the turf and the track simultaneously is if you decide to do one or the other later, then you're protecting the one that you just built. So if you redo your track and then say 2 years from now you're gonna put turf in, you're covering up the track and trying to protect everything while you put the turf in. And you do have to dig up a significant amount to put groundwater storage in place for the turf because of how fast it goes through the turf, which is what it's supposed to do. But, so there's some synchronicity in doing those two aspects together, but the rest of it could all be done line item whenever you wanted.
Yeah, that was one of the, if you wanna listen to the negative people, is, well, it's more damaging on people's joints.
The turf.
Joints, if you do this, if you have a turf field, which, who knows what's right or wrong, but that, I mean, that was a negative thing, that if you looked into this, and so you keep it grass, it's less expensive right from the beginning, and we get the track updated,
But
we get the scoreboard updated,
And PA.
but still, a track, a PA and a scoreboard probably isn't $3 million.
And what's the cost of a track? Just
I'd have to go back and take a look at the
Go
line
into
item,
it.
but it's over $1 million for rebuilding that track and resurfacing it.
But yeah, I think the scoreboard was 400 or $500,000.
Yeah.
And then you have PA, which is, you're not gonna hit the 3 million for doing something, I don't think. And that's just me looking at it, you're not gonna hit that you'd be right at, you could get, for $3 million, we can probably get our track usable again.
I just wonder, do you lump the PA and the scoreboard into the maintenance? Is that a maintenance item on one question? And a second question is the track rebuild. So at least we get that the stadium is usable with a scoreboard.
That you ask a really good question, and I can speak to the turf aspect too, because we did that during my tenure in Slinger as well, and there's something to be said about that being part of a maintenance item, because quite honestly, once you put a turf field in, the upfront cost is significant. But we did it for a safety factor. Our field had been so compressed that we were gonna have to recrown it anyway, and just recrowning a soil field was $250,000. We were looking at significant number of concussions that last year playing on the soil turf because it was so compacted, it was bordering on concrete. Once we put the turf field in, injuries declined, maintenance, we had no more grass cutting, all you do is rake it and maintain it. There's no watering, those are some striping, no grass cutting. We figured out that we were saving $25,000 to $30,000 a year on maintenance of a grass field once that turf field was put in. And our strategy, A, it's safer, B, it could play in all weather conditions. The girls' soccer in the spring, when the soccer field wasn't thawed, would slide over and play on our turf field, so better playability for all sports. And we set aside that $25,000 to $30,000 that we were using for watering, striping, and grass cutting, and put that in a turf replacement fund so that after the shelf life, 13 to 15 years of the turf field, it never wears out, it dries out based on the sun, and just gets brittle over time. And then we have the money basically pre-saved already for that new carpet to be laid down, because we're so far ahead on maintaining that. So there's some economy of scale on putting a turf field in, to say nothing of the safety, the playability, all the things that come with improving it for kids. So just to roll it into the maintenance would not be dishonest or misleading in any way. You're saving maintenance dollars long range by putting that in.
Well, and that goes back to conversations we've had with soccer as well, because I think that was another big reason with that turf, because then you'd be having that dual, it would be hosting those soccer games as well. Right, is that part of the discussion?
That was part of the discussion, is that soccer needs were lights and sound for the soccer stadium, and by doing the turf, it created that. Also with the gym space addition, there's only so much room on site,
Take out
and it was
that
going to
soccer.
displace the soccer field, so if you're not doing the gym addition, you don't have that pending need of the soccer field goes away. So it does keep the soccer field as part of your existing campus, so you wouldn't have to necessarily do it. You still have the issue with lights and sound, but you're talking about which priorities do you defer or not do it this time.
Wasn't there 1.5 in traffic improvements too, that we didn't necessarily need to have?
Yeah, there's some cost in there for adding the additional turn lane, and there's some other items there that could be reduced, yeah. That's a good point.
That was
where's that in there?
It's
What's,
in the
Maintenance.
stadium improvements.
that was in stadium.
Question number one, it was. But I think with your comment before, like I think some of the comments that we heard, you know, leading up to the referendum and after, I think that was something that I heard from our last referendum, that it was fixing or didn't get done last time. I think that was some of the
Yeah.
you know, some of, not saying that that's, some of the rumblings, I think, that were going on, that some of that money should have been done the first time, or we're fixing, not say that, but. But I don't expect you to have these numbers, so, but I think, I remember at our, initially, the facilities committee, it was kind of in one of the first meetings, we talked about just the projections for, you know, another school 10 years down the road. And I think that that was kind of some of the comments that I've heard, and some of even recent comments. And this past weekend, I was, someone had talked about there's more buildings coming to Somerset. There's more growth that's projected to happen. Like, would that have those, I'm sure it hasn't been run recently, but is there a chance that those numbers could significantly change? I mean, I think that was, I heard from some people like, well, what if we need a new school in 4 years? And I know that it was presented as, well, it would be like 10 years down the road.
It likely is that based on the housing permits that you have in town and
Okay.
what you see being built. I know it's really hard to drive by and see all the schools being built right next to the school, and people would naturally go, look, you're building all these houses. But the reality is, a new house, the average is about a half a student. So in order to get enough kids together to have critical mass where you'd say, our enrollment's gonna go up 800 kids, you're building well over 1,000 homes to do that over that period of time. And so you really have to see a significant increase in home building to say, yeah, we can track this and know that that's coming.
Okay,
And we're not seeing that from the city perspective either. So.
okay.
Yeah, we had a similar situation in Slinger. We had a 270 home subdivision here 2 years ago, and we were only getting about 2/3 of a child per home. But one thing we did talk about with Shannon when we were brainstorming post-election is, even if you get 22 million of good work done right now, people start to get excited. You get excited about the work that's taking place, and maybe if you come back and do some phasing in a couple of years, you have more homes that share the cost across. And people just generally are like, wow, we're proud of our schools, they're on the rise. Now let's do the next phase. Let's get that gym improvement done or something like that. So we passed 5 referendums in 27 years, and we didn't wait for one to get paid off before we did the next. We scaffolded them based on momentum that was building and homes that are building and the excitement that was coming and seeing the middle school got done. Now let's do the high school. Okay, now we got the high school up to speed. Let's put in that artificial turf, and people want to have great schools, and people move to town when they see their schools. The schools are nice, and so you could do this in phases. By staying within the costing and get things done a few years from now, during Shannon's tenure and during this board's tenure.
Good information.
Yeah.
So for you guys, could you, I guess I'm just kind of thinking in terms of maintenance, can we restructure that maintenance thing? Can we move the scoreboard, move the PA? If there's any other maintenance-related issues, and kind of get us a number to see where that would land for question 1? Right, and then we want to know track. And then the auditorium, I think the auditorium is still a priority, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I think we need to scale back on that field. And just like you said, if we can tier it, if we can get a scoreboard and PA and a track, we're sitting good for a little bit, right? It's at least usable.
Well, and I think Rob said it well with, if you come back to the voters, you have to change something, you have to make it more, so we listened. We took some of that into consideration.
What, Rob or Darren, is it right to come back? Can we And we talked a little last time about coming back with a question in the spring. Is that a good option, or do we wait till the fall? Again, I guess, what's your take on that?
Well, the challenge you have is you can't come back in the fall. You're not able to put something on the ballot until then, April of '24. So it's a particularly pivotal question for you to face this January, is whether you draft a resolution for this April, because Wisconsin statutes don't allow you to go to election in the fall of '23. So my opinion, and I think I would love to hear where Rob stands too, because again, I've done what Shannon's done for a chunk of years, but I've not done this role that Rob has for our company nearly as much as he did. But I could see coming back and doing it this April, but holding listening sessions and making it very explicit. We heard you, that's why we're coming back with a redone, remodeled, refreshed plan, significantly less money. And this is why we're asking the question. We're not going asking mom and dad the same question the third time until they say yes. We're coming back and saying completely redone, reprioritized based on that we heard you. Rob, what would you say?
Well, factually, I agree with Darren, and the only thing I would add is you get 2 questions per calendar year, not by school year. So you could come back in April, then you reset, so you get another 2, but that's your only shot for 2 since you don't have November. I guess I've grown to be more of a nervous Nelly. I've become more financially conservative in these numbers as I look at them more, and I you know, we actually just got off a call with Spooner talking about how ballots don't branch. So if I feel passionately about whatever you have in question 2, maybe that's the only one I say yes to, and I skip whatever you have in question 1 because I want to wave a flag for whatever you have in question 2, and you really don't get your problem solved with that, because maybe it's cheaper than what's in question 1. Maybe not, but maybe I just feel more passionately about it. So could you do 2 questions again? I think it's certainly possible. First, legally, yes, absolutely you can. I just get nervous about how you may split a vote if people want to say yes to something, but they're not going to say yes to everything you put on the package, which is not a reason not to do 2 questions. It's just a strong caution of what you put in option 2 or question 2 based on what you put in option 1 or question 1. I really think it's logical, this path you're going down in terms of packaging maintenance or packaging this question 1 as a maintenance project with these groups, and maybe it is partially with your athletic fields, because it's not only for the kids, but maybe it opens up your field and your facilities to the community even more. And Darren's right, I mean, you're not lying, that is maintenance costs that you are cutting down by not having to reside your football field all the time. And so where this direction, or where this board is going, I think it makes a lot of sense, and it really allows you to come back and say, hey, in total, this is going to be whatever, 40%, make up a number, 40% of what we asked you for the first time in total, and that really makes a big difference with people.
You just want the headlines to be school board heard you, coming back with a redone plan and repackaged plan. Superintendent is going to have listening sessions at all 5 buildings between January and March to be very specific about what that new plan entails. Get some newsletters out there with bullets. This is what the new plan, reduced plan, redone scope entails.
So, just be thinking back to the 2 questions. I think that hurt us on this last one more than it helped us. Just me thinking about it, because we didn't push it as 1 question or 2 questions. I think the majority of us pushed it as vote yes twice. You know, that was how I think most of us came off all the time, was yes, yes. There was no yes, no vote. And we were trying to get people to only vote for the 25 million and then not in, because that's what they could pass, or we would feel more comfortable because it was only $1 more than this 22 million that they thought we might have choice or chance. And they voted no for all of them, or a little bit more. There wasn't much difference. So when I look at 2 questions again, I think, why don't we just put it all in at 1 and do it for less, not the 25, we cut down, we are listening, we are simplifying this sports complex. Yeah, it's not you know, I heard the 25 million still in the range of, or 22 million still in the air phase, but hey, it was 25 million, we were short by 100 votes. We're cutting 3 million off because we are trying to do it for less, but we're doing it as one question.
Well, let's not
Pe-
forget, it
both
would be
people talk-
taking away the softball fields and the gym.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
we're-
so that
we're
wouldn't
saying
even be
that
part
3
of the-
million, But that's
right.
that's a huge piece that would be
I
taken
guess
away.
I was just, for the first 25
Yeah.
million was question one.
Yeah.
And we were hoping that we would at least get support for that, if not, but it was even across the board. So, do we do two? Because there was people saying no to the updates at the elementary school still. I mean, that strong group was, well, why aren't you saving your money better? Why aren't you looking ahead? So I think we're gonna have the no, if you were no, you were no. And I think, I would just be afraid we'd be doing that again. But, I don't know.
Rob, do you have any data on, kind of on that, the two question thought process? Is it, are you more apt to get no's, or is there any data around that?
I wish I had something very numerical to tell you. I can mostly speak to the anecdotal experiences that we have is, first, the second question always hears more no's than the first one. In general, the further you go down, people get referendum fatigue, and they may feel generous, but they don't want to give you everything, so they're gonna be more inclined to check yes for something that's in the first question than in the second question, all things being equal. The caveat to that, though, is going back to the point of the PAC. If I feel very, very, very strongly about arts in Somerset, I may say no to question one, and I may say yes to question two, which then splits the yes vote. You know, if you think of your yes votes as being a fixed pot, and some people are very passionate, I keep picking on the PAC, it really is just an example. And you know that you're only gonna hit so many yes votes, and then you take some of those yes votes and you put them into question two only, then you're gonna decline the chances of both. So I wish I had a smarter, like, 30% decline, and I don't really, I just had the anecdotal data of, in general, two questions are gonna be less supportive than one base plan kind of question.
Right, okay. And then my other question is, the stadium and the Performing Arts Center, stadium scored higher, correct?
That's correct.
And do you think that has to do with, is there any data about why? Is it the cost, just a lower cost?
Yeah, in general, yeah, and especially when you talk about athletics versus arts projects, it really comes down to, you might want to support the kids in the extracurricular problems or extracurricular opportunities they have, but 6 is less than half of 13.5, and I might want to support something, but that's my cutoff. And not for nothing, but stadium did score higher.
Okay.
As a board, did you hear any feedback post-referendum or during the campaign of, I don't like this part about the question, or was it just, the only response you got was the no vote, and you can't point to anything and go, this was a lightning rod for our community?
I think something that really stood out to me was there was a lot of talk about growth. We keep saying it, growth, the buildings, we're gonna need another building. And I don't think we pushed hard enough that we're okay right now, space-wise. And that we have talked about a plan. I think we need to be more vocal that we do have a plan, because in all reality, if 10 years is our window, in 5 years, we need to probably start the process. So it's not that far away, but it is far enough away. And I think people are saying, well, we're gonna give you 36 million now, and then we're gonna need to give you a building in 2 years from now, and that's not accurate, but I don't know if we were vocal enough about that.
No, you're not even at capacity right now, so you've got time before you even fill the buildings up to get to that point, and then have enough kids to put into another building.
Okay.
A big push, right? I think that's a
Yeah,
big one.
because I think exactly like you said, people see the new houses, and that's kind of why I'd asked the question, because I think people are like, oh, why are we worried about this when we have all this?
And I think the other thing is, people also harped on maintenance. We didn't budget for it, we're not prepared for it. How did it catch you off guard? So I think maybe after your meetings and your pictures that you had, I saw a lot of people say, oh, okay, I didn't realize. So if we we can be a little stronger on maintenance. And, you know, I always like how you kind of relate it back to your house. You know, a furnace only lasts so long in your house. And I don't know, people just don't, you just don't connect it.
I'd even go so far as to say your 6 million in maintenance is far lower than almost every other district that we work with in terms of their maintenance needs, so you're doing a great job of taking care of those. The fact that you only have $6 million of priority needs is a testament to how well the district does.
I heard a lot of complaints about the turf as well, though.
Yep, I would agree with that.
I think people looked, the complaints, I think people looked at it not as a necessity, it's like, oh, well. But that's where you go to, Darren, what you were saying too, just that giving that knowledge, well, when you have the field like you have, the amount of money that goes into maintenance and upkeep and safety pieces as well.
You know, we had to resist a community pushback of the turf as well, because there was a day when people equated turf fields with ACL injuries because of that carpet and people just have these, they take shortcuts in their thinking. And so we had to definitely educate and talk about, we had samples. It's strands of grass, just like our grass, that's actually softer in all temperatures and safer for the children and never gets wore out. Whereas grass tears up. We had our 3rd, 4th, 5th grade youth playing on that from 8 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, and the field was perfect condition the next day. And I just think there's some messaging maybe that you could do so people understand why it is a maintenance item and a safety item and a community use item.
But you're really not saving any money on maintenance because you have to put that money aside to replace it when the life expectancy is out.
True. True. There is that. Some districts don't do that. That was just me being a cheapo trying to make sure that I didn't get caught later on with it. I mean, it's more than cost neutral though, because our savings fund is way ahead of what it would take to replace the turf. For me, I wanted to leave the district in good shape and just make sure that money was there. But it's when you factor in all the, you know, we were renting it out for other community groups to use and holding playoff events there because it was in great condition in November and October compared to the old field that was tore up, and we were ahead on putting the turf field in for sure.
I agree, all of it, but that's not how a lot of people are gonna see it or think about it. No matter what you say, there's always the backside to that story. You know, someone heard 50 years ago or 20 years ago that that's what the turf was. So I'd like to have it in too. I think it makes sense, but there's nothing wrong with the grass field is what a lot of people are gonna say.
Especially in this community right now.
Yep,
That's-
yes. I'm just saying, if we wanna listen to the people who said no, give us the track that we can use. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Give us a track we can use, give us a scoreboard, give us a PA, give us something. Can our kids still play football there? Yep, they can still use it. But let's support everybody. Believe me, I don't wanna be saying that, but as a holistic view, I think we have to kind of say that and say we are listening to you.
Is that an 8 or a 9 lane track?
It'd be a 9, I think we would have to.
I think the other thing that was hard, because when we first came out with projected numbers, and maybe this was when the first survey went through, the estimated amount that was significantly higher than when numbers were redone right after we approved those questions. And I think then some of the comments that I saw were like, these aren't accurate. Like, you went from this number down to this number, which I think then there was some hesitation with community members thinking of that honesty piece, like, well, how did they get from this number to a different number? So. Other questions for school perceptions or from our board members?
I mean, as a board, what are we looking at January, are we looking at April? or
So
are
we
not?
would need to make a decision by the January 9th meeting if we wanted to put this on the ballot in April.
I'm not hearing a resounding no from them. And say if we don't ask now,
Here's the question,
it's
if you put it
April.
on the ballot in April, what are you losing?
Well, other than, I think, some connection or trust in the community, like we just, if we're gonna put it there, we need to ensure that we do our work to fix what was on there already. We can't just put it on there, or we're gonna get no's. But I mean, this discussion, I think that we're all in.
I mean, if we go with this, if we get it down to a $22 million number, which is
Under
$3 million
22.
less than the first question, huh?
Under 22.
21.5.
It's
You
not
know.
uncommon for schools to take referendums back after they've not passed the first time, right?
Right.
I mean, you guys have had,
Needs don't change.
We have the maintenance costs, that's the thing, is
Yeah.
we have the maintenance costs.
Shannon, be quiet.
Oh, I'm just listening, yeah, lots of thoughts. I mean, my preference would be to go back in April. I think focusing on the three projects that via our survey data were the most highly supported. My thought would be, coming back to our next meeting in December, having some updated numbers, from both of you of, okay, what does that look like? What is the new stadium number? What does that have to mean in terms of what we reduce? Obviously you're hearing the conversation, so where does that land? That's my initial thought. I go back and forth on turf because I continue to think that that's a need. I get it. And so I'm kind of where you are, Bruce, of, you get it, but something's gonna have to give, right? So, and it goes back to the conversation that I had with Darren and Rob a couple weeks ago of, we knew that it was right on the edge with the decision that we made previously of going above and beyond a dollar amount that was, supported in our survey, and so we need to come back with a different plan, so.
well, and we had a long conversation about those two questions. Could we do the two questions? And remember, we had,
Mhm.
we thought, if one passes, then two, and it's like, you can't do that. And I'm gonna go back to what Rob said, like, what if you put two questions, and Bruce, you
Mhm.
spoke to it, you put two questions, and the maintenance that we know is needed, I mean, we want all these things, and I know there's that discretion between want and need, but if you do those two questions, I mean, we kind of thought in our heads, I think, that one may have more followers than two, and that wasn't the case.
Yeah, we didn't get that. It didn't drop off.
No.
It just was,
I just wonder, I mean, as we talk about maintenance and stuff, is the track a maintenance issue, right? Like, what if we scrap the entire stadium, the talk of the stadium, get rid of that entire project, but we maintain what we need to fix, which is the scoreboard, the PA, and the track. Those
I
three
think
things are not
that's-
functional.
I think that's kind of where I was
Yeah.
going with it, is that I know, I've had conversations with Mr. Nemec that you can change that fence, you can widen that, you don't have to tear out the whole thing and start over. It can stay almost within the parameters, just make it a little bit longer like we did the last time.
Which would tell the community that, I mean, again, if we're scrapping that entire project.
Yeah, we're fixing the track and we're getting a scoreboard and a sound system out there to function again,
And for what it's worth, we can provide grass and synthetic options, so you can see it both cost-wise. They're probably not that far off from each other these days.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I think
There's always
that would be good
alternates you can put in
information to
there.
have, so then if we did continue to go forth with that turf option, we could give those concrete examples.
Yep.
And I think people knew them, but it maybe wasn't, if that's something that's even put out a little bit differently.
I mean, other than you make perfect sense, Matt, other than the auditorium, it's all maintenance.
Right.
I mean, that field's stadium, it's been used, I mean, it's 20 years plus, and a lot of those parts are cooler, so, other than the auditorium, it is maintenance.
So, school perceptions, I guess I have one last question for you guys. Just hearing our conversation, if we were to get rid of the stadium project and just maintain, which would take us to maintenance and then the auditorium, one question or two questions? Is there a limit where you start to ask too many things in one question? How do we get this down to one question?
I would be in favor, if I were at your board level and reporting to you as superintendent, of bundling the most important things into one question, in a repackaged, one question, cleaned up. We heard you, and this is what we're coming back to you with, maybe a couple 100,000 million under 22 million.
Okay.
Come
In one
back with
question.
reduced scope, all in one clean question.
Okay.
And just talk about, these are the most important things. Knowing you're 100 votes away, these are the most important things. We're gonna ask it again, but a different way at a reduced cost.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what Darren's saying. The part that I'm torn on, because you obviously, goes without saying, you obviously know Somerset better than we do, is in general, athletics improvements test quite poorly. Will the Somerset community simply read a track redo or turf, but not whatever else, simply as stadium improvements under any other name? And I don't know, so I guess I would rely on you to kind of tell me what your ears to the ground tell you, because branding won't help, but legitimate changes will, but I don't know if those legitimate changes are going to, I don't know how those are going to be read. And if they are read as athletic projects, then people are going to respond by saying, you know, you just pulled the wool over eyes, they're going to do stadium improvements, but talk about there's something else. So I do like the idea of one clean question to really get you what you need, and you don't split a vote then that way, but I guess what you put in, I don't know how people will do. And my crystal ball is extra money.
I mean,
Thank you.
I like how he just said, trying to pull wool over our eyes, like.
Yeah, right.
I think we need to,
I'm concerned with that too.
because, you know, when you say, well, these are improvements, but I can see someone reading it, well, hey, this is really exactly what they were asking for the first time,
Right.
but they're wording it differently. And then I feel like when we go back to that concerns with the community, like with the numbers, for instance, look at these numbers, they're fooling us, like, these aren't true. I don't, you know, I think that we need to be very clear and concise.
And that's why I even think like the turf, just
Yeah.
cut it out. Like, let's not even talk about it anymore, because that was a huge thing. Yeah, and it can't look like we're trying to trick anybody, because that's not
no,
the
but I mean,
intent.
if we say we're redoing the track, scoreboard, and sound, I mean, that's pretty.
But I'll go back
Right.
to the turf, like, and I'm kind of, when Shannon's like, I'm going back and forth, because, you know, ultimately, what I want turf, yeah. But you did hear rumblings, but then it's like the squeaky wheel, you know, like, were there really that many concerns, or were those people,
There
are
was-
no votes
There
and
was 100
wanted,
more than there
There was enough to vote no.
but
Yeah,
wanted
so-
to then pull, you know, what's something I can pull out? Like, is that, was it really the turf, or is that the reason that they really wanted, I don't know.
Well, I mean, even if it was, I don't know if it was part of the bleachers were in that number coming out of there, but that was one that, what's wrong with our bleachers? Why would we replace the bleachers? They're fine. You know, they were just done, you know? So again, we're not touching the bleachers, and we won't.
And I just, when you start to talk turf, you know, in my mind, I start to think stadium,
Yeah.
big, expensive, like, that's just, even though it's not real, I think it just has this, this perception that this is a huge project, where even just the scoreboard and the PA, it doesn't feel like.
I think the picture can be taken with the PA sitting on a piece of plywood
Or if
outside the
someone
window.
came to a football game and they heard it, to know that really we don't have a PA. We borrow, that is loaned.
So you guys heard us. You're gonna see what you can come back with? Under 21, under 22.
It's gonna be tough to get under 22, unless you make some significant cut, because the turf and bleachers alone, that's not $3 million, so.
Is
We'll
it
come back with
1.5?
some recommendations, but we'll have to make some difficult decisions with that to get to 22. You had asked a question about what's the risk of going in April. The risk that I see is not so much the going in April, it's the waiting to 24 if you did this, because inflation is really difficult for us right now. We were just talking about whether or not we think we can hold the numbers on inflation from November to April and still do the project without dealing with that. You can't hold the inflation out to 2024. It's gonna be significant. And so even if you went back with the same question in 2024, it's gonna be considerably more expensive.
Puts you starting fall of 24.
So it's another factor to deal with it. And that might be something, if you do decide to go to April, part of your message to your community is we don't have an option for November. If we wait this long, this is the time that the state will allow us to do this. We have to ask this question now, and so there's some messaging that goes in there as well. I would also point out that as we looked at your numbers for votes historically, we believe the vote yes number was in the range of 1,000 to 1,200 is what we needed. You had over 2,000 people voting yes. Your vote yes group did a fantastic job getting people there. There were just twice as many votes as anybody expected coming to the polls. So I don't know how that plays into it one way or the other, but you greatly exceeded the number of votes that you intended to get.
So it sounds like we're talking about it again in December session.
2 weeks, right?
Does it have to be, because we had said January 9th as a date, but does it have to be like filed by that day?
So even a day after that, we'll cut it close. So
So I
it would be
feel like-
awesome even if next meeting.
I was gonna say, I feel like our goal should.
It could be kind of finalized and
Should
done.
be to come to a decision at our next meeting.
Mhm. That would ensure we have
So
plenty
we
of time.
don't, we're not cutting it
Right.
as close.
Mhm.
And is Dave gonna have updated numbers on a 22 million tax impact?
We can.
I think that would be helpful, because I mean, last time I think that kind
Mhm.
of skewed us on our decision-making.
Yeah.
You know, and I would also tell people it was $4 and this time it's 22, 3 or 2 or what, you
Mhm.
know?
Okay,
Lauren, what are you thinking?
I'll tell you later. I'll tell you at the next meeting.
All right, perfect.
any other thoughts, questions?
I think we need to reach out to that house.
So I agree.
I think we need to get their support to some degree on what, not fighting that.
On what they support.
I mean, Brad made a good point that you're actually only 50 votes off. But if it had passed by 1 vote, I wouldn't feel very good about it. I'd like to see something pass 70%, you know, overwhelming support. But then we know we did our job right.
I would say, of the vote no's, I probably only came in contact with 20 of the vote no's at the most through this whole process. Any event we were at, there was vote no's there, or maybe one, or the whole night was a vote no. Community meeting that we had, like we said, there was only 20 people there, there was only 25 people the second time. And-
It hit hard on social media.
But really, was there a lot of people on social media? There wasn't 2,000 people on social media on vote
It
no.
was close to 6,000, not just there, where the
I
conversation
guess I'm
was
not
taking
on that
place.
section, that spot. I didn't see.
Yeah, as you said,
2,000
I thought the
people.
same thing as we've sat here is we need to connect with some of those, the loud voices,
Mhm.
and figure out what would they support, and why or why not.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else, or can we keep moving forward? Okay. Let's-
Thank you to you guys.
Thank you for coming and
Thanks,
taking
School
your
Perceptions.
time.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
yeah, take care,
Thank
bye-bye.
you. Thank you, guys.
Of course.
Okay, moving on
you.
to our superintendent updates.
Switching gears, like,
Yes.
okay, where are we here? Okay, I just have kind of two quick things, and then the last part is really kind of more you guys, but just wanted to give a quick recap. You know, last week we had our first kind of inclement weather decision-making. You know, as I put in my weekend update to all of you, you know, staff, students made it home. I can also see, as I said, why those decisions are highly stressful. Started my morning at 3:38 that morning, looking out my window, waiting for a flake to fall. So I feel like, you know, we made kind of a good run through in terms of Infinite Campus has a new messaging system that we hadn't used before, or that I hadn't used specifically before. Got some kinks kind of worked out. Again, early releases. You know, in general, inclement weather isn't something that, you know, we encounter all that often, but early release is even more rare. But, you know, great communication with other districts around the area, admin team, staff, you know, lots of people staying late to ensure that kids were picked up, which was awesome. Lots of hands on deck, so that was very much appreciated on something that ended up being a little bit unexpected. Strategic plan update. So I did a Google Meet this morning with Dr. Pritzel. Actually, he connected me with one of his colleagues that does strategic planning. So we had a great conversation, really kind of started talking about process, timelines, you know, things that really after the holiday break we need to get moving, getting information out to stakeholders so we can get some good community groups going, some focus groups. All of this stuff I will bring to you in much more detail as we kind of finalize some of the planning. But it was great just to kind of start talking about, you know, thinking about things that we're doing really well in our district and the areas that we can be really forward thinking, and what does that look like and how does that align to our current needs, our future needs. We talked about referendum things, facilities, academics, just lots of things, so it was a great discussion. So as I said, you know, after Christmas break, I'll continue to give you, you know, certainly more frequent updates about where we are. Probably be looking for, you know, 2 board members to be a part of that process, which would include meetings during the day, you know, just again, as community members, having you a part of that. So we'll talk more about that as well. So then obviously a big piece, like I said, ensuring that we get a really good, you know, diverse group of community members, parents, non-parents, staff members, students, you know, and obviously the district has been through strategic planning before, but so lots of good things to come. It was a great conversation and kind of nice to start thinking about that process, which will be a big one. And the other thing I had, again, actually is really more about you guys, just reviewing the evaluation tool for the superintendent position. I had sent you a draft that Lee had put together based off of the conversation when he was here 2 weeks ago, listening to you as a board, things that you think are important, expectations that you have. He tends to err on less is more, so you'll see it wasn't, you know, 5 pages. It was trying to really narrow down to, based off of and personalized to the conversation that you guys had with him when he was here for the board development. So that document obviously is up to you guys in terms of how you want to edit, where you add, where you subtract. So I'm going to kind of pass it off to you guys to have some discussion about.
Strategic plan, can we go back real quick?
Yeah.
So the current one runs until when?
Well, remember it was kind of a funky deal. It was supposed to be done already, but we extended it 1 more year because the COVID year, we kind of put it on hold. So this year, we don't really have any action steps that we're working on. We've been articulating and using our 2 learner outcomes as our reference point for our strategic plan. So
what's your date in mind that you want to have this done?
So in theory, I would love to have it finalized by our 2nd meeting in April. You know, in talking to our facilitator today, she thinks that's doable. Oftentimes what drags that out a little bit is availability in terms of community meetings, being able to get dates set, those kinds of things. But she said we're, you know, starting it well ahead of time, that she doesn't foresee that being an issue. But so my target date is having it finalized, done, approved, ready to rock at our 2nd meeting in April.
And then would that be effective immediately, or do you start it school year?
July 1,
July,
essentially,
right.
Yep. So 2023
July 1.
and forward, yep. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
So the draft Alicia sent out on Friday. If you're looking in your email, it's not connected to the agenda. And we can kind of go forward. I know Bruce and Lori had emailed kind of some suggestions and questions, so this is kind of our time that we can change things. I know one of the things that was specifically asked about is the how are we the distinguished, proficient, basic needs improvement, and it was added on there on the top. It shows what the educator effectiveness criteria is. That can definitely be changed. I know that we had talked and we had that discussion with Lee, like how many do we want to choose from? Do we have a lot or a little or those pieces as well? So was everybody able to open that to see it?
I just put it on because I noticed they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that definitely,
It doesn't matter. I don't. Either way, it's fine. We get this. It's all about the same. What the top says and what the scoring is.
Lori, do you want to speak to, you handed us all a copy prior to the meeting. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, what I noticed about the evaluation draft that we got from Dr. Pritzel was that it didn't talk about the 6 professional standards that Wisconsin DPI and the CESA 6 model use with educator effectiveness, which is what we use in our district for the evaluation of our other staff. And many of the areas that we have here, I think, could easily be put in those 6 professional standard categories. I think it would just be a matter of organizing a little bit and putting the different areas under the different professional standards. The other thing was, I think it's important that we include in the evaluation what Shannon's goals are for this year. And if you look at the template that I shared, this is what we used for several years with Mark Bezek when he was here. And it had the 6 professional standards, and then it had his job goals. And so you just filled those in, and that was part of the evaluation as well. And then the last page just kind of puts it all together. I'm all for simplifying it. I'm not saying that we need to do, for example, the performance indicators. I'd be all for reducing those. And if we could take what Dr. Pritzel sent us and, put his performance indicators under the areas, under the different performance standards where they would fit, that might be the way to go. But also, I think it's important that we add Shannon's goals to the evaluation.
I would like to know from Dr. Pritzel, I guess his opinion on using this tool that matches all the other staff, or do you do something slightly different for the superintendent? And then his opinion on merging the 2 of these in some fashion? I mean, he's from Wisconsin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he's aware of all the tools that Lori's talking about?
Yeah, I think, so I've never seen this either until today. I didn't know it existed, and I think he also doesn't know that this was being used. So I'm happy to share it with him. I can give him, Lacey, you can do this too. I don't even need to be involved in this, but, so, great.
So then these 6 areas are being used for principals and other staff?
So they're not the same 6 areas.
Okay.
Right.
These are the performance standards for district administrators. They're not the performance standards for other administrators or for other staff members, for example, teachers, guidance counselors, support staff.
I think just one thing, and I appreciate both kind of things to look at, is to look at I want to make sure we're covering everything, but I also want to look at the simplicity, because as we're talking about how we assess other staff members as far as, I know okay, so it's different areas, but you guys are trained and have professional development and have the background to do those assessments with other staff members. Us as board members, we're coming in from a variety of, backgrounds and different things where we haven't taken necessarily professional development or things on, the correct way to go through some of those processes, so.
That's
Makes
why
sense.
this paper form is different
Mhm.
than if Bruce remembers how this started. Before I was on the board, you were trying to use dates, and it was all on the computer. Cherie and I got, I think I got a little taste of it just once. But it was very complicated and it was very difficult to use, which is why we formed a committee and met with Mark and kind of took the main points and put it into a paper form, so it was simpler. But I think it could be made more simple still.
I'm kind of hearing from you, Lori, like a big thing that you'd want, kind of comparing the two, would be the goals piece, like making sure that those goals are put within.
And I think it's important that we have, a few, 1 or 2 or 3 performance indicators for each professional standard that a district administrator is supposed to demonstrate to be effective.
So say more to that.
Well, the 6 professional standards, strategic leadership. And that has a lot to do with the strategic plan that Shannon's going to be working on developing. Instructional leadership, how are we doing academically? Professional development in the district, and I know that's one of Shannon's goals for this year. I don't remember exactly how you worded it, but it was something about the professional development being offered to the staff to improve our academic progress. Human resources leadership, I think that's an important one.
Some of these kind of overlap though with what Dr. Pritzel has, right?
Yes.
I mean, they're very,
Yeah,
they're
just
very close.
labeled differently, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then operations and resource management, running the district, the finances, communication and community relationships. And then the 6th one is professionalism. So some of these have indicators, 7 of them, 8 indicators, 6 of them. Most of them, the least is 6. Most of them have 7 or 8. I'm not saying that we need all of these.
Yeah.
And I think we can certainly use what Dr. Pritzel organized for us and kind of blend the two. But I think that we should break them down into these 6 performance standards.
Just looking at the difference between these 6 versus the actual down.
So many of those are in his, they're just in different categories. The one piece I don't see is anything financial. That certainly would be a good thing to add in, and I'm not sure. Maybe just under the administration piece.
Yeah, it could be added to.
But yeah, a lot of those, they're just questioned a little differently and maybe not as intense with the details.
And this also, the goal to have this complete, what was the date? We didn't set one, did we?
Tomorrow.
We like to check it off the list though.
I know, yes, yes.
Okay.
I think for lots of reasons, trying to get it, in its finalized form sooner rather than later would be great.
You want us to do it in January, I think, right?
To actually do an evaluation, yeah. So one of you will talk to Dr. Pitzel
Yeah,
about merging and
yeah.
then next meeting come back with?
And maybe we can share it out sooner than later,
Mhm.
as far as before the next meeting, so then if there are specific questions.
I guess I read through the one on there, and the one thing I did like is I didn't have to do the don't know or on any of those questions, and here I know that there were some that I couldn't, or just didn't know, and that didn't make sense to you, and something I would know. That was why I asked you the one question today about it, is would I even know that? So if you clarified the difference, or,
Yep.
but it was, yeah, that's what I didn't want, and there was a lot of these I remember trying to figure out, I don't know, how would I even know that?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I agree that simplifying it and having the goals, I think.
I just remember last year was our first year doing that, and a lot of these questions, I was like, where am I supposed to find the answer to that?
Yeah, because typically you do your summative evaluation in June, and you have brand-new board members starting in May. So, and that's very normal to have brand-new board members who don't know, because what experience do you have?
Okay.
As I was looking through these just really quick too, I think simplifying is great, but, you know, there's many of these indicators, and I'm just looking at the one that Lori had sent out, that, you know, many of them that I already would have a ton of evidence for to show you, and some that in January I might have zero, right? Or even by the end of the year, again, depending on focus and things like that, that I'm really heavy in strategic planning, right, REFRM and all that stuff, there might be some on here that just because of the, right, the direction, the goals, whatever it is, the year, that just I don't get to. So I kind of like the option, like you're saying, Bruce, of not forcing a, you know, a 4-3-2-1 or whatever it is, if there's something on there that, I mean, I don't want to be penalized for if there's something on here that I can't provide evidence for. And obviously my goals are driving and dictating that most heavily, but does that make sense? So
Yeah.
that was
Well,
just
I look
my
at,
2
okay,
cents.
if we go to referendum, again, look at all the time and effort, you know, that's been put in the last few months, and then would potentially be in the next coming months. So I think to Lori too, like including those goals, but then making sure that these areas are then almost linked, you know, that we're including everything, but making sure that they're relevant to the goals that were made. So then I think you're right on, Shannon, so you don't have that stress of, okay, this is really the areas I'm focusing on, I'm not leaving these behind, but making sure that these indicators are then linked to the goals that are set as well.
You know, and thinking about referendum, I think every one of these performance standards are linked to that work. I mean, communication, for sure, budgeting, the financial part, the strategic leadership. You know,
Well, and truthfully, I need I think, more time to look through and have them both, you know,
Side by
printed out
side.
in front to
Which
know,
is
okay,
why
how
I
should we
check off
kind
what's
of
missing.
printing them out.
put towards, and then kind of go from there. And I think too, Shannon, like looking through, you know, if there's ones exactly, okay, this is kind of said here, this is kind of said here, or if there's one specifically, because we, you know, kind of developed this first one from our discussion with our board development. If there's really ones on this that are like, hey, this does not apply, like I don't feel comfortable having this on here, I think that needs to be taken into account because of, we did this collectively to come up with these, and I think that's something we can be proud of as a board and you as a superintendent, that we developed this personalized together too, so. Okay. I'll keep you all updated on that.
Thanks for that, Lori.
Okay, moving on, policy 164.2 is linked. This was a follow-up from our Once Around the Table. If you have had a chance to read the policy, Marge, you had requested that this was, and this was seconded. Do you want to speak to it, Marge? Do you have any?
Well, I thought that the newer members should be updated on that policy because we were trying to call a special board meeting and I learned about it on Facebook, which is not the appropriate thing to put it on. So it was how we do it. The other thing that we talked about at that meeting was we gave all of our, I think, Alicia, do you have all of our phone numbers?
Cell phone numbers?
Yeah.
I don't think I have everyone's.
Because we talked about, we gave all of our cell phone numbers, and it was different people at that time, that each member should be contacted and told about the meeting, because that one special meeting that we were supposed to have, I didn't learn about till 7 o'clock at night when I got done with work. I saw my email, and it was at 5:30. And then I got chastised for not being there. So,
And we dictated too how we
Yeah.
wanted to be
How we want-
contacted. You know,
yes.
would we prefer a call or a text, or what the most
Yeah.
efficient way was
Right.
And who?
to communicate, yeah.
who's
Yep.
calling.
And it specifically says in this policy who has the ability to
call and contact
a-
people.
a special meeting. And it's the school district clerk, or in the school district clerk's absence, the president.
They can call after, I read this earlier and I wanted to read. So a special meeting of the board shall be held upon the written request of any board member. So therefore, if, for instance, Bruce were to give a written request to Cherie, then, I just want to clarify, she would call it, or it would be her discretion?
No, provided there is compliance with the following notice provisions and state law. So then you need to read the next paragraph. And one of the things it says in here is something about shall notify each board member of the date, time, and place of meeting in a manner likely to give the board member notice of the meeting. And that's why we specifically stated our preference as to being contacted by a text, phone call.
So as the clerk, what I would love is for each of you to drop me an email and send me your preferred method of contact, and then also your cell phone number, if that is your preferred method, by a text or phone call. And then I can keep that, and I'll copy you in on the results of that, so you and I have it. And then if
And it's also
something-
important to make that personal contact with each board
And
member.
get a response.
So you know
Right.
you have a quorum, because if you don't have a quorum, you can't have a meeting.
That's right.
Okay. Any other questions with that, or anything you want to add, Marge?
Nope, that was it.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay, moving on. The representative for the WASB, there is a link with this as well. This won't take 10 minutes. It's just stating that the state convention is in Milwaukee, the 18th through the 20th. If you're available and able and interested, reach out to,
Either myself or Alicia, and we can help get people registered, et cetera. You know, typically this is something that I will put some priority on attending. I cannot attend this year. I'm also trying to put some priority on attending my son's varsity basketball games, so I'm trying to balance that a little bit. So, I mean, I think Laura, you've been down there, right? I don't know if anybody else has at the table.
Marge, did you go last year?
I don't think it was that one. I think
Was it
it
different?
was,
Okay.
it was something different.
I've heard
Did
there
you go to
was.
one of the Dells?
Yes.
Yeah, so it was something different.
Okay.
It was a legal,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is nothing that we're obligated or required to have anyone attend. I know I've put it in my update a couple times too. It's just kind of one more throwing it out there. Really nothing else that needs to be done, and just more like information, so.
Okay.
You should have put 2 minutes or 1 minute.
Okay, our topics for action, we have personnel updates in the areas of athletics, activities, personnel, and employee sick banks. Is there any questions related to those, or is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve or 10A, 1, 2, and 3.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Once around the table. Bruce, do you want to start?
No, I don't have anything.
Sheree?
I would like to invite everyone to our Light the Night event on Monday. The Somerset Chamber is putting on Santa on Main Street. We're gonna have free cookie decorating and lots of fun stuff. We're doing a pole this year. It's not an actual tree, it's a Charlie Brown tree. In the empty parking lot between Rose Tattoo and Sportsman. So bring the kids, bring the grandkids. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
What day?
Pictures with Santa, Monday the 12th.
Time?
Starts at 4:30, 4:30 to 7 maybe.
And are you doing the cookie decorating outside?
That will be inside, yes, and as of right now, it's gonna be in the building right next to My Happy Place, in that empty space. He's not moving in until January. So, yeah. Yeah, the new owner offered that.
Marge? Lori?
Yeah, I would like to have on the next work session agenda a discussion about what our protocol procedure is for having an employee sick bank. And I can tell you more about why, if you'd like to hear that now, or we can wait.
I'd like to hear why.
Yeah.
In the past, there was not a limit on the number of days. Employees could offer up to 2 days each, but the number of employees who offered was not limited. And when you have a situation where you have a young teacher or support staff who has not been in the district for very long, so they have not had the opportunity to accrue sick days, and they're in a major car accident or something, 10 days is probably not going to be enough. And in the past, there wasn't a limit. I can think of one specific example of an employee who had been here for a long time, but had cancer. And she needed 30 days. And people were happy and willing to donate that. And they were allowed to, and she had all the days she needed to take care of herself and get better. And so I don't know what happened to limit it to 10 days. This has not come to the board. I can't find a board policy about it. I don't think it's in the employee handbook. What happened to make this change?
So is there someone else who would like that, you're requesting it on the work session, so not our next meeting, but the January work session? Is there a
Second.
second, Matt?
So I just want to recap. There wasn't a limit, there now is a limit, and you would advocate to get rid of the limit. Yes, I second that.
Anything else, Lori? Ian?
No, I mean, I asked, I think it was last meeting, about a projected budget, looking into the future a little bit. Whenever we can get around to it, but now it seems a little more concerned about it if we're gonna go forward with another referendum. I would hate to have to come forward with another operational after that.
What the states, what the budget looks like for the 23-24 school year, that's what you're looking at?
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Rather than what we already know about.
Which we won't have access to until, could be even after staffing.
Yeah, so the last update I had from the state was that when they figure out where all the money is going with the budget, education is last. So that's why it ends up being so late, where it's June or July. So I can tell you we're having lots of internal conversations in terms of scenarios and things like that. It's definitely a priority topic that we are talking about frequently. So I can talk to Dave and kind of see, what might be updated or relevant to be able to bring, especially now it looks like we're leaning pretty heavy towards going back in April and maybe we can kind of bring all of that together at the next meeting.
Is there a second person who would like to see that information as
Oh,
well?
sorry, I
Yeah.
jumped
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to add one thing, would there be a way for Dave to give us a fourth grade level overview of kind of understanding the budget? And I think what I would like to understand and speak to is, can we set money aside to replace the HVAC every 20 years? Or are we limited on what kind of money we can save? How does that work when the state is
Well,
involved?
he can bring it up, but on our operational referendum from before, that was the goal. We asked for the 1 million?
It was 1 million.
1 million we asked. And again, it was one of those, Bezick wanted 1.2 because he was, hey, we need to aside money, you know, that extra 200,000 would allow, but again, it was one of those, probably won't pass if you ask for that little bit extra. But then, since then, we've also had two health insurance increases of $600,000, which is a recurring one. So any money, I think our first year we did pocket 250 years in our
I would
budget.
use the word pocket.
They went into our balance to increase
Our
our,
Fund 10 balance.
our Fund 10
We
balance.
increased our Fund 10 balance.
I think that's where the money though that we save does go, correct? It goes,
Well, I wouldn't take my word for it, I would ask Dave.
So as Dave talks about projected budget, if there's a way to break that down and give it very simplified, I don't know, I think of city council meetings where they've taken a dollar bill and basically broken that dollar bill up of, you know, with different revenue sources and expenses, as a visual, anything I can learn to speak to
it's
would
on
be helpful for
his
me.
page, isn't it? It's on his,
Yeah,
his
Dave.
Does
business
Dave have that?
page, yeah.
Okay.
He
He's
will
got it
tell
on
you
his little
it's
page
all
of
on his webpage.
where all the money
I know
comes
it's a
from.
moving target, I'm just kind of looking for,
Yeah.
I know we have different plans, if X that way.
But making sure that we're knowledgeable going into
Yeah, we can't
the
go into
next
a half
decision.
million next year.
Got it.
Anything else,
Perfect.
Ian? Matt?
The only thing is, Lori, you talked last meeting about the policy that you didn't see updated, or changed. I've gone through, which one were you referring to, and did it get updated in Fort Knox?
I quit looking at all of them, but there is,
Could you just send me whatever
yeah.
snippet so I can
and
make sure?
My question would be, so you said that everything was sent to Chris and they were updated. So are they updated in the drafts? Because they're certainly not updated in the
Yeah, so
active
he would've-
policies.
What he told me is he updated the drafts, and then the drafts go to production to get finalized. So I don't know that,
And when I looked at the drafts, the one I remember in particular, and I don't remember the number of it, a sentence is written twice,
okay.
and that is not fixed.
Right, and let me just clarify with him, because he talked about punctuation and formatting. He doesn't fix that, and maybe when you were communicating with him, you had him fix all that stuff. He's told me every time they fix it at production. So I guess I don't fully understand the flow once we give it back to Neola. So if you find that, you can send it to me so I can verify.
Yep.
Um,
But, I don't want, it takes me a considerable amount of time to,
Compare.
yeah,
I have it written
and I
down
don't
somewhere.
want
You do?
to spend all the time
Yeah, no, I agree.
doing it if
Or
I'm
I
not
could-
even looking at the right thing.
I could look back at the meeting and watch it too, because it was a certain one that was brought
That's
up.
what I can do
that one.
as well. Okay, I want to make sure we address, and I want to make sure we fix the process. I just don't want it to be lost, so. Okay,
Thank you.
I have nothing else.
I have nothing. So I actually do want to just speak our last meeting. I commend all of you guys, all of us, because we stayed late, but I was really happy with the board development and just kind of the discussion that we had. So I appreciated that. Okay, so is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned at 7:44.